Thank you very much for being here. Lindsay, Rick, Joshua, I'm Diego Nunez, the director of World Leadership Co. World Leadership Co. is an ecosystem where thought leadership converges. We are building a community, not in Slack, we're using another platform that I will announce next week. We will build reports along with Lindsay. We have a ton of content like these conversations, private groups, private roundtables, interviews, partnerships with other platforms like Design Ops Assembly, like Inclusive Design Leadership, and others. It's always about leadership. So if you're a product manager, if you are a marketing people, a sales people, a customer experience people, please jump in and let me know how we can help you. This is a free community at the moment, so please get get in contact. Today we will be talking about customer experience leadership and what does that mean. I know it sounds basic, but we need to define what it is in this context. Why do we call these sessions Hearthside sessions? It's because I'm not a native speaker of English, but in my experience, Hearthside is like the place where the fireplace is located in a house where you can talk to people, where you are comfortable, where you can enjoy and be open with people, mostly your family in Latin American countries and these Hispanic countries. In the US, I don't know if it's with family or with friends, but it's always a cool place to be. So, Lindsay, Joshua, thank you so much for being here. How are you, Lindsay?
Pretty good.
Doing wonderful. Thank you, Diego, for having us.
Okay, so Joshua, Lindsay,
Mhm.
Rick, and there's someone else that I can read the name. And Rick, I will ask questions. Please, if you have some thoughts, just raise your hand or jump in into the question. I will start with Lindsay and Josh, but you can speak to. Please, it's important for me that you speak to. So, Joshua,
Mhm.
can you briefly describe, and by briefly, I mean really, really briefly, what is your role and responsibilities as a CX leader in the latest company you have been working on?
Sure, absolutely. In a very brief statement, I bring a lot of customer centricity to products. And in that, it's just about where are your valuable customers, where's the value in those relationships, what's meaningful within moments of their journey, and when and why, are all areas that I've been working on over the last few years with my clientele to help them build better products, whether that's an app or whether that's a commerce experience. There's quite a few to name, which I won't name all here, but that's been a lot of my work most recently, bringing a lot of customer centricity to that mindset.
Okay, thank you so much. Lindsay, I will not ask you about your role. I will ask you like both Josh and you come from the design from a design background. Well, you come from different backgrounds, but your latest background was like a design leader in DLF, in the Design Leadership Forum. That I don't know if that exists yet. But what was the transition between being a design leader to customer experience leader, and what's the connection? Because I know Joshua and you are like, hey, customer experience belongs to design because you design experiences. So can you tell me more about that?
Um, yeah, first off, just to clarify, customer experience is a design field. So it
Hmm.
doesn't necessarily mean that it belongs to design, just like design doesn't necessarily belong to anyone. It's something that helps and benefits because all the design is about is solving problems, which is what all of us need to
Hmm.
do. Um, Frankly, I got into this whole career field as a fluke. My first career, I was a mimic singer. I ruptured my vocal cords, and my patient experience sucked. In fact, one of the surgeons ended up causing harm to my thyroid. Um, so I didn't know it, but once I was able to talk again, which took nearly a year, I went back to my
Hmm.
doctors and thanked them gratefully because there was even worry there that I wouldn't be able to talk again, let alone sing a note again. But I based the first thing I did, just because I didn't want anyone else to go through what I went through, was, hey, how can I help you? But I didn't say it as a help your patients. I said it as a, and thought of it as a practitioner, as my doctor who helped make sure that my vocal cords were supposed to be what they were supposed to be. How can I make sure that you don't have all of those frustrating experiences again? How can I help you as the back office nurse who helped to make sure that doctor had his brain right when he needed to be helping me? How can I make sure that folks like you have the support mechanisms in place that they need to help make sure patients like me actually get out of here with the results that we're expecting and are praying for? I was very um, lucky that the majority of the doctors that helped me took me up on that. They're like, hey, if you think you can do anything. And fortunately, I was. I didn't know I was getting into human factors. I didn't know I was getting into user or customer experience. I just knew that, like, hey, I ended up in a very weird situation medically, and everyone who was supposed to be able to help me didn't know how to deal with it either. Not because they didn't have the expertise, but because everything around them that was supposed to support them didn't work for them in my situation. So yeah, I've been doing it ever since because there's so many things out there and we've all done it, whether we've been a patient somewhere and the doctor maybe got our records mixed up with another patient, or maybe we've used an application and we were sold on this application would help us in this way and it ended up doing all these other things instead. All these different things that happen when it doesn't align with a need we have that we thought that thing or that person or that service would serve and help with. That's how I got into this, and that's why I've stayed into this.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Rick, do you want to share something before we jump into the next set of questions to the not so basic?
Yeah, I
No,
would
let's continue.
probably. Oh,
Wait,
I'm sorry.
Rick.
Go ahead, Rick. Oh, okay, go ahead, Rick.
No, I was going to say, just go ahead and continue on.
Okay, so well then, I, I I want to know in your latest company or your latest experience, how that company defined customer experience. Like what the definition of customer experience in that organization, Josh?
Well, I don't want to focus on one particular client because that wouldn't be fair. And the challenge really within that,
But
Diego,
wait,
is
wait.
that
You were working in an agency, so
I
I
was.
suppose when the clients came into the agency, they asked, "Hey, we need customer experience help." Is that the way they were asking for help in that agency, or it's just, "Hey, get the full packages of designers, and you can choose them"? If so, what was your agency selling to that client? Like, "Hey, we have customer experience leaders that can help you." Is that how that worked in your company?
Yeah, absolutely. I will talk a little bit about that from just the work that I oversaw for 4 years, which was in the experience design and experience strategy relationship. Within that, we worked with clients a lot on just helping them better understand who their customers were in a
Mhm.
nutshell, right? We either took a great deal of quantitative data, whether we leveraged epsilon data, on their customers or other metrics of engagement, down to also doing qualitative research as well, with just whether it's site intercepts or surveys or whatnot, really helping craft a better understanding of what matters to their customers and when. So a good deal of journey work. I created several different journeys with my team,
Mhm.
uh, all exceptionally talented over there. And within that, just what we essentially drafted was something that I've been working on for almost 4 or 5 years, which was a discussion around moments in those journeys that were really meaningful. Um, and you can call them, many different things to many people. We gave the term pivotal moments that came over from Jonathan Tatlow at the time. But the idea there is that we were really trying to just find this moment that was really meaningful in the journey and then lean into that. Like, what do we need from a social media, from a CRM, from a product experience? We were always thinking about that omni-channel relationship beyond
Mhm.
not just the product and the commerce that we were driving, but everything else that needed to support them in that experience as well.
Before I go to Lindsay, in this case, Josh, customer experience is before making the sale, after making the sale, and for returning customers, or it was just like, hey, we already have this set of customers? Because what was the company doing? It was like just a retail company, or was what kind of company you were working for? Not the agency, like the other one. What?
Oh, who
Don't
the
tell us the name
client?
of the company. What was the client doing? What was the?
This is for Lindsay.
No, no,
No,
for you.
yeah, he's asking you what kind of clients you had. I know you probably can't say like the names of the companies, but the
Yeah.
kind of clients.
Yeah, so they were across different industries as well. One was an auto company that manufacture automobiles. Another one
Okay.
was, in the consumer electronics space.
Mhm.
We've worked with even just like areas of higher education where we helped a higher ed uh, just help them with their input funnel. And to your point, those questions were everything prior to the experience and up to like that selling point, and then the post sell relationship where they want to obviously nurture that relationship further with their customers to get repeat sales as well. So it's both before and after if you look at it from a customer experience relationship.
Okay, that's fantastic. Lindsay, so can you tell us about something similar to Josh's, similar, but from your point of view, what, because you were working for a company, not an agency, right?
Yes, I typically work for a company. As a full-time employee. There are times that, much like Josh, I've also been a consultant, but I tend to jump into the consulting world for shorter stints because I can do it for a couple of years and then no, I want that team, that dedicated team I can chat with. I've often been a customer experience director or a customer experience manager, or even a creative director as a full-time employee inside companies. Because of the kind of work that we do, whether it's really any of the design fields, we have access to sensitive company information. So I'm not going to drop company names, but I will say, much like Josh, I've worked with tech firms, I've worked with education companies, I've worked with basically you can look at my resume to find out, but there are some similarities that I find. And yes, a lot of executives think exactly like Diego, your questions are kind of implying, of customers are about those people who aren't buying from us yet. Users are those people who have bought from us and are doing a thing. Really, if you look at the definition of customer and user, it's yes, the person who uses the thing, but the customer is the person who pays for the thing. If it's a subscription service, they're always paying for the thing, and there's a interconnection there. If the user's having problems or annoyances or whatever using the thing, they're going to advise the people paying for the thing not to. They're going to advise them to go somewhere else. There's going to be an interconnection there. And usually it's the CX teams that, or even sometimes the UX teams who are advocating for what those synergies are, why they matter. Oftentimes, what I find myself doing in a lot of my full-time roles is just getting a lot of this started because maybe between the board and the C-suite, or within the C-suite, or the C-suite and right underneath them, they're arguing about what the heck to do, if CX matters, if any of this matters. So negotiating with them of like, okay, the data matters. Where and how you house your data. That data is going to be the first place that you can find out anything about CX, about UX, about any of it. Because how long are they staying on a page? Are they navigating away from that page often? Are they staying on this area that you want them to be using because it's supposed to be a core function, or all of these features that you think that they bought, they're not using? There's all of this basic data that when you know, like, what is your intention to meet the need and how is that being used, you can start looking into, but then you can expand that out to whom are you solving this need for? When you put this thing together, you put it together because it would meet a market need. Who is that market? Is that market still happy with you? What is their perception of you? What is their perception of your solutions? There's all of that. And often what I find myself doing within companies is just advocating for the value of doing all of that, the value of moving forward with collecting that information and analyzing that information, and often within a tool. For my last two major roles, what I found myself doing was helping to set up that tool, ClickTail and Qualtrics being some awesome ones that I've gotten to work in, and they're phenomenal in that someone like me can come in and set up the core architecture of it, of making sure that insights can come in, data can flow in, but then mentoring others to actually be the analysts to refine that over time. Pardon
Bless
me,
you.
to refine that over time and make sure that it's becoming an informative insights engine that the company can use. Now, some companies have been awesome about really adapting to that and saying, hey, like we just learned through this information that people have this perception of us in this way. They have this perception of our tools in this way, and they're also not signing up here. We've also had this fail point. Here's where that all intersects, and here's where that qual and quant come together. And therefore, here's how we can act. And they're doing so from an informed way. Other companies, for their different reasons, aren't buying into that yet. They're siloing off data because they're still possibly debating over who should have access to it, who should have rights to it. They're siloing off activities as to who should or should not do things. Because something like CX, it is a corporate-wide thing. Everyone's playing in the same sandbox. It's acknowledging that. So it really more ties in with the digital transformations and really the corporate transformations and corporate buildups, which is what someone like me often comes in and is helping to negotiate with and helping to sell those different integration points.
Okay. I have three follow-up questions, but do you have something to say, Josh, Nick, or Ashwani, about what Lindsay said?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Lindsay was spot on in that. And if I was to pull that back for a second from a larger view, I mean, I think one of the challenges within CX today, or a lot of misconceptions around that, is that it's a revenue spend to get there versus a revenue generator. And the reality is that it really needs to be thought of as a revenue generator. If you want to go, down to like your MBAs and whatnot, like classic Peter Drucker, and I'm going to bastardize his quote, but he was quoted as saying, businesses are there to serve the needs of the customers that can't otherwise complete, that service or product. So in that, I mean, he says it right there. This is like what, 1970s? Like he's saying, focus on your customers. And yet you have a lot of companies that say, yeah, we love our customers. We're customer centric. We're definitely focused on that. And the challenge is that, yes, that might be true. And most of the times it is. I find, clients are never saying, oh, we hate our customers, right? I mean, that doesn't happen, right? But in the reality is that you'll have a sensibility as to how they're actually connecting that relationship once that gets actually lost in translation. And that usually typically will happen whether it's metrics that they're not being measured on, like Lindsay was mentioning. It might be in requirements. I work a lot in product requirements, having spent years in UX and digital and product strategy and product design. And sometimes just those that just gets lost in the requirements as they're writing it down. I've seen Jira tickets where it's just like, who's your customer or your persona, and it's just like, human, and I've literally seen these, and so when you look at that, then when you get into development or execution, that translation can easily get lost. And so having a vision, having journeys that are very tactical, having an understanding of the what and the why with the how is so important for companies to be successful in that relationship, so that when it lines up with that customer goal and that need in that moment, it really resonates and hits really well.
One thing I want to add to that real quick, because for a lot of the companies, whether I've worked with them as a full-time employee or a consultant, I agree with you that CX is entirely a generator, but not always in every stage for every company. And one of the ways that I've seen it in the flip side of that, when it's not being a generator, it's almost like a cost confirmation. The whole idea, like I know the quote I grew up with was measure twice, cut once, to confirm that thing you're going to do, like that's the money you should be spending in the right way. So it saves you money. It makes sure that you, like, when it's not that generative step for you, it can be that step. And frankly, even when it's not that generative step, it's still that step to help make sure that that thing you're planning on spending that money on, is that actually where your budget should be going?
Okay, thank you so much for that. So, follow-up question. You mentioned UX and CX sometimes overlapping, Lindsay, and I think also happens with I'm sorry, UX and UI. So, what can you say are the main differences between, like, really briefly, between UX and CX? You talk about user and customer, so I want to be sure of what you meant by CX and UX.
So there's a couple of things there. So CX and UX, there are a bunch of different experience design fields, be it user, be it customer, be it employee, be it distributor, be it like there's so many noun acronym choices.
Mhm.
Pick one, spin the wheel. Um, but for customer and user in today's world, for what I'm seeing throughout the US and Canada and parts of Europe, customer is about literally the person paying, and user is about literally the person who is using it. But
Mhm.
they're not always one and the same. They're sometimes
Yes.
different people. Yeah. The whole UX UI thing, user interface and user experience, the way someone interacts with something, why someone interacts with something is different than that interface that they see. And research studies have proven time and time again, whether it's been Stanford, Harvard, pick a place who has done the research, that people will forgive ugly far faster than they will forgive not usable, far faster than they will forgive doesn't meet the need. Like, because there's a difference between like, oh, you're going to look better in time versus you lied to me. And there are whole debates out there that you can Google and research and find out about UX versus UI. But in a nutshell, at least for me, with the work that I've done over the years, how someone can engage with it, if it's going to react to them, respond to them in a way that they were anticipating, that they were expecting, versus does it look like the brand? Does it look like what we've done? Does it look like it belongs as a part of this corporate entity? There's a reason why you go into a McDonald's and you know it's a McDonald's place. It was a McDonald's app. It would, like, there's elements of that. One has nothing to do with the other, but they both highly influence the other.
Okay, so thank you for that. And the second follow-up question for both of you is that you mentioned a lot of things about market and knowing your user, knowing your customer, and doing research. So sometimes I feel like it's overlapping marketing.
It is
Like
big time.
so, what about that? Like, how do you work with marketing departments? How, in my experience, when I've been speaking with other executives, is that yeah, from the design leadership perspective, yes, we want to help and we want to offer help, but we don't know how to offer that help to marketing and sales. So, what about customer experience? How is perceived by marketing people if they know what you are doing, or they're like, hey, they are redoing my work. This doesn't make sense. Is that a struggle that exists
Oh,
in those
yes.
organizations?
Yeah, big time. What I can speak to on the employee side, um, in my personal experience, people who are, as my grandma would say, long in the tooth, they've been working in marketing a long time, and they're aware that marketing is one of the newer departments to be set up within corporate America, within a lot of corporations. They know that, like, hey, UX, CX, all of that is a new guy on the block. There's going to be some overlap. We need to be collaborators. When I'm inside a company that has those kind of marketing folks, I've never found any friction between them and anyone else, be it a UX department, a CX department, anything. But when it's a newer marketing department and it's all about, we've got to sell this, we've got to get these things done, they want to be the ones to run everything.
Mhm,
And I
mhm.
encounter that more often on the consulting side, which, Josh, I wouldn't be surprised as if the case of what you encounter more often of, then marketing's like, well, why did you hire this outside firm to do these things? Why did you hire these outside place? And when you're inside in the employee side of it, oftentimes I found myself like, hey, like, yes, we hired Bain, or we hired Razorfish, or we hired so-and-so as the outside firm to help us with this, because we need that knowledge now. We're going to need that knowledge for the next 9, 12, 18 months, but we're not going to need them for the next 10 years. We're going to need them now. And we need to give them information. We need to give them the insights and details that we know. Oftentimes marketing pays for playbooks. They pay for research, but that research is all about how to sell, how to support the sales team, how to support different strategies. But oftentimes what CX and UX teams find is that they're finding the same data. Whereas oftentimes inside the companies, if those playbooks and those research had just been shared, then half the work that those teams would have started with would have been done. But a lot of companies lose sight of the fact that the research that and the details that CX and UX can really glean out is the whys. It's like, all right, you found out, like, hey, this is how that language is going to resonate, but that's how you found out today. If you want to know next year, kind of like the way you would sell a product before the pandemic is drastically different than after. Do you want to go back out to that company and pay them again for a new playbook? Or do you want to have a research team already finding out how these things have evolved, how the perceptions about you have changed, how the impactfulness and tactfulness of your solutions have changed, and constantly fueling that back into your company? Are you being proactive or reactive is really the question. And are you being collaborative? Are you being transparent internally with your information so that you can be collaborative enough externally when you hire a firm, like some of the places that Josh has worked for more often than I have, to let them know, hey, this is what we already know. Because I wouldn't, I know a few times for me on either side of the house, I've been the one advocating for, hey, I understand that you guys have this information. If you share it with us, if you just make it available, here's the time you'll save. Here's the knowledge gap that you'll save, and the benefit to those other teams when we're able to share back what we know.
Yeah, I love that discussion because it really is about collaboration, and what I would add to that. Well, I should say, before I add to that, I mean, just if you want some historical context that I have observed, and I've been on both sides of those relationships, right? Actually, up to joining an agency, I was on the engineering side, especially like at United Airlines, where I reported to the managing director of engineering. But in the last few years, I've been mostly in the space of connecting with CMOs, right, in that marketing. And in that, what's happened over the last few years has been like, okay, there's this big push. The C-suite comes in, the CEO, whatnot, says, okay, we got to do more CX, right? Okay, well, okay, who's going to take that, right? Okay, let's give that to a CMO. And because the assumption there is, and rightly so, is that they're very much aware of customers, right? The challenge is that intensity, and I'm bringing a lot of empathy within CMOs that I've worked with in this space, because people just don't realize I mean, dear Lord, some CMOs only like make it like for, I think the average lifespan of a CMO is like 2 or 3 years at a company because so much demand is being put on them. They are being pushed to sell products faster than they can even get to that point, as well as an understanding of how they keep those customers as well. And one of those areas that I would just quickly expand on is I have seen massive revenue spend on acquiring customers because that's the area that a lot of companies want to focus on. Rightly so, makes complete sense. And yet retention of those customers is a fraction of that budget. And so you're looking at CRM, you're looking at teams that are trying to retain and maintain that relationship with the customers is completely either lost or just not really focused on because of those budgets. And so what you then have is a lot of churn because you have this whole acquisition cost, and then you have research that shows anywhere between 3 to 7 times, as much as 7 or 8 times more money needs to be spent to bring that customer back because you had such a poor customer experience. Maybe you didn't deliver the product right. Maybe they didn't understand what product or service that they were using as to like, how it would benefit their lifestyle. Whatever that might be, a lot of teams were, given an unfair disadvantage because they weren't set up that way. And so within that space, you have a lot of marketing teams that are just struggling to, focus their energy on having a good balance between capturing new customers, but then also wanting to maintain. And again, it's just because the goals of the company are also offset.
Okay, thank you for that. I want to take a few steps back into defining what CX is, and I want to know. I have three questions. The first one is, in the perfect world, how does a CX team look like? Like, how many designers? Do you need designers? Do you need researchers? What do you need in order to have I know it depends on the company, but if you were like, hey, Joshua, Lindsay, Rick, Ashwani, you can have, and you will lead an agency of customer experience. Who are you hiring? What kind of people are you hiring?
So for me, I look at that in kind of the flip side. If an executive team, if a corporate board, if that level of the company is finally like, you know what, we need to invest in customer experience. If they go out to a Bain, a McKinsey, any of the top four, they're going to be told that like, hey, customer experience is all about those different interactions and the perceptions people have of you. So when it comes to leadership from that level, that is the definition of CX. The execution of CX really depends, because like if you look like a Disney, everything is CX. They shape their food to help with the experience. They go to the extreme. They don't even call people who work in their cruise ships or at their whatever they're called, staffers, they call them actors. So they really go above and beyond to make sure that it's about the experience. For other companies like a car manufacturer, they've kind of got their market pegged. There's not too many brands of vehicle that you need to go to, and you're not actually competing with Jeep. You're competing with a dealer who sells Jeep. So it's on that dealer to find that intersection for them. And so for them, it's still about being that intersection who meets the needs. But then since they're not the manufacturer of the car, what else about the needs are they meeting? Are they making it affordable? Are they making it a pleasurable experience? Are they making it frustrating, or are they actually serving a community somehow? So that's where you're right. It entirely depends, but it depends on the kind of company you've chosen to be, the kind of stuff you've chosen to sell. And ideally, when you made those two choices, you knew you're going to have a product market fit somewhere. You knew you were going to have a service market fit somewhere. So there's already a core of that. That's about what is that need you're solving for? Therefore, what interactions do you need to provide to solve that need?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I mean, that's where I would support that as well. Is to answer your question, yes, Diego, you do need a team within that relationship of, and whoever that looks like, you can identify that, right? Whether it's just members that are dedicated to the customer experience, and you definitely have a group of team members that might be researchers, that might be people that are looking at quantitative and qualitative research and metrics. It might be change management professionals as well, in terms of how to harmonize what the business needs to achieve with what the customer wants to purchase, acquire, or utilize.
Data scientists.
But yes. But then even to that point, yes, to Lindsay's point, it's a lot of frontline teams, and it's also about making sure that, titles aside, that there is, it's all about culture, and again, to quote Peter Drucker again, for since we're on that topic, it's like, culture eats strategy for breakfast. You can have like great ideas, about what that needs to be. But if your team doesn't feel like they're being supported in a way, then that can be a challenge. And I'll give a little bit of like an insight, an example of that, like how all teams can really be connected to customer experience. One sort of anecdote that I'll share is when I was at United, and I had a privilege to work with just some amazing people in the airline space. One thing that you'll probably notice is that you get like flight attendants and airline teams that get a lot of crap on social media. And within that, I worked with those teams on a daily basis, weekly basis. I would send my research team out to any airport to evaluate the products that we were building for those teams, because I was in the operational space leading a UX and research team. And so within that, one of the areas that we were looking to do was launch this new compensation application. It was a mobile app that we were looking to build. And what we wanted to do is empower those frontline teams to be able to issue compensation if their flight was delayed because of a mechanical issue, or something might have happened, whatever it might have been. Maybe there was a broken seat on the plane or whatnot. Instead of having them fill out some sort of grievance or compensation at the end of their trip, we wanted to give it in the moment. And actually the app was called In the Moment Care. So my team quickly sprung to action. We had 4 months to release this, and we started ideating. We did a lot of UX testing, evaluations. We really built something that we were really excited and proud of. It had a very simple flow, very clean design. Agent could quickly tap through this and issue out a compensation. So we quickly got it out, and we did some testing with agents in the field. The agent said, "We love this. This is amazing. This is so easy to use." We're like, "Okay, great." We're so excited to get it out the door. And they're like, "But we'll never use it." And we're like, "Wait, you're not going to use it? Like, wait, what's going on here? Like, is there something we're not providing in the experience? Is it not really meeting some goals?" And like, "No, you have to understand is that we have traditionally been sometimes dinged for issuing compensation in the past, where we might get called into an office and whatnot." And so what we realized, and United, to their credit, made enormous changes in their policy, something that was called Core 4, where it was reorientating a lot of their prioritization to empower their frontline teams to make decisions, even to a point now where like agents can hold a plane for a few minutes if they know that a family is connecting from one flight to another, and they know that, and they're given the tools and the data to see that they're still not disrupting, the operations of that plane in terms of how it impacts any downline travel. And so within that experience, that's where customer experience is played on multiple levels, and having an organization recognize that through the leadership, such as what I experienced at United Airlines, is something that's so critical to having people provide value and provide emphasis in that space.
Okay, thank you, Josh. Thank you, Lindsay. Rick, please go ahead.
Sure. In commenting on Josh, your story about the airlines and those who said they're not going to use it. So that's the culture part, where there's an environment where those who have the highest visibility and the direct connection to, let's say, quote unquote, compensate, they don't feel safe. And you actually said that, but you didn't use those words. You used different words. We're going to be called into an office. They don't feel safe in order to, maybe compensate is that quick Band-Aid on fixing a situation, because of course there's a much bigger problem to solve there. But in order to deal with the situation at hand, you have these real humans who are empathetic toward the situation, toward the customer, say, I'm not going to use it because I don't feel safe. And you follow that up with the changes that were made and so on in order to break down that barrier so the people who have that ability, because they're right there in the moment, to feel safe in order to do that without fear of reprisal, getting dinged, you use that word. And that's huge. That's one key step for those who are at the front lines in order to be able to make those take those actions, right? And Diego, going back to your question on that, I would say that the team makeup is really based around the company, the industry, the situation. Some companies have the ability to have a team in order to put all that together. The other way that an organization will be able to do that is rally the troops of different pockets of part of the organization in order to bring that together, because you might have an analytics group or merely an analytics person, because that's all the organization can support, along with, so you bring everyone together in these different pockets so they're not necessarily part of, from a functional standpoint, report up to the same person as this is the team that we're going to build. It's bringing together all the people from the different functional and global areas in order to bring that together. And I was just reading a submittal for the CXPA Awards, which will be announced in a couple of weeks here. But they brought people from throughout the global organization together in order to have a, you get a lot of buy-in that way, because people are being brought in to have, they're going to have skin in the game, but they're not necessarily part of that a department. They're part of numerous departments globally. So it's just a different take on a team structure in that regard.
Thank you so much, Rick, for that. And yes, I agree. It depends on company, and it depends on so many things. So I have to. We have 15 more minutes. Well, we have all the day if you have time for that. But I have two topics. I need your help to choose. The first one is going back into the company side and say CX belongs where, which is something I want to know. Who do you report to? I was talking that to Lindsay and Josh, like CX reports to who? And the other one that I like better is frontline teams, because also I recommend you to read, if you don't know, Josh, about CX Ops. They talk all things about CX and something
CX roundtables, yeah.
So they speak about employee experience. And my question is, like, you as a frontline frontline employee, why do you care? Like, actually, like, you are at the end of the chain, you only get paid. Like, I guess you are the lowest end of payment. So why do you care of talking about compensation, or saying no, I don't care, or yes, have the money, it's not my money? So which path do you want to take? Like, going back to the company and CX belongs where, or to speak a little more about employee experience here?
For me, they can be intertwined, because what I really appreciate about what Rick pinned in there is, and this is big for me, having worked internally for so long, it is the environment. Culture and environment are not one and the same, but they do really impact one another. When I've worked with a lot of international companies, and when they're large enough, the environment can be micro and macro, and they're constantly fighting each other, because maybe that department, department A versus department B, and within each of those departments they have certain management styles, and anyone under that particular kind of director, they know you don't submit tickets unless you want to take off that director, or you don't submit any, or you don't make those kind of actions unless you want blowback. Even though there might be direction from the CMO or the CFO or whoever to do these things, you still don't do it, because the person who can impact you first will hurt you.
Going back to them not feeling safe.
Yes. Or what I've seen in the absolute worst case is that there's so much gaslighting, there's so much infighting that it's more of a war mechanism. It's more of a us versus them. So
Mhm.
because I'm in this department, in this team, I can't support them. I'm not supposed to. I know that they're against us. So it goes back to that culture. Like if you don't set up an environment to allow that culture to exist, you can't break down those data silos. You can't actually have an information share in any way. I know one of the things that I did not too long ago with a large international firm was just trying to get it through to the board and to the executive committee that it's like, when you guys give me, just me, access to the data, here's everything I can see. But you have corporate initiatives that say this department is not allowed to share departmental data with this department. You draw a line in the sand that they can't know these things. But if you bring fluidity into it, guess what? You're going to help everybody. Because and at other companies, I've actually seen them put entire departments of analysts where it's like, hey, as an analyst, if you're this level, then you have access to this data lake, this data lake, this data lake, but no one else does. And I've also seen entire teams go out and pay for McKinsey and Bain and then not share that with anybody. It's like, you just tell us, but we're not going to tell the rest of the company. So it's a privatization by choice. And the result of, and therefore bringing in these kind of activities to try to retroactively resolve. I start with that first because if it's someone like a McDonald's or a Disney, then they have to first come to that point of, was this of our own making? And if so, what of our infrastructure do we have to change? And is that infrastructure of like a departmental organization thing, maybe a business rules thing, maybe an environment thing? But if your other companies like what Rick and Josh were speaking towards, maybe you just have a core ancillary team that's all about the CX research and the CX department, but then you have different people strategically throughout the company who are able to help them, be it analysts, be it different team leads, be it whomever. I know something that I've seen be highly successful, admittedly not in the States, but throughout the EU, is when they do that. They do a strong, strategic, small, like 3 to 8 person team that is all about the CX, reporting it out, getting those data insights together. But then they have people in each and every other department helping them. So that way, regardless of how the companies carve themselves up, there's always those support mechanisms to make the thing happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, do you have anything else to say, Josh or Rick, about that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, Lindsay covered a lot there. So, and all, yeah, spot on. I mean, I think it's just to maybe if I was to summarize, that from my point and some takeaways, is like figure out with a company what really matters, and like really try to get at the heart of that. Is it about revenue generation? Cool. Then like focus on that. Is it about revenue loss or efficiency factors? For some companies, they know that they're struggling with just an efficiency factor, and then you can look at it from that lens as to how customer experience can improve that. So if it's from like a revenue generation, you can think, okay, how do we get closer to our customers? How do we know where they are and what their needs are so that we're delivering on that? Frame it that way. If it's from an efficiency factor, it could be more, let's say, and again, I'm generalizing very quickly on this, but it could be something around like, well, if we are going to spend X amount of money on this digital transformation or new product, or maybe it's a 0-1 product launch or whatever it might be. I work in the product space quite a bit in platforms, even on a technology deployment. You could think about like, well, what are the factors that could create a fail point within this, right? So then, or is it like, how much overbuild we'll need to do once we launch that to get it right for the customer after we release it. So we want to reduce that, that friction, and in doing so, by bringing the customer closer to the requirements and the deployment and the build of that, you can actually shift some of that thinking. And one thing I'll just sort of leave as a takeaway that I've been working with from time to time is just getting more of those. Okay, if your companies use OKRs or KPIs, try to find some alignment. Just simple tactical things that you can do is just think where all of these teams are being measured on or being evaluated on, and get some alignment on that, and use that as a common thread to feed in a better discussion around what the customer goals are, what their needs, where they need to be, where's the value in those segments, whether it's on a quantitative or qualitative level. You can do that in a way that just starts to seed in a little bit more about the value of customer experience. You don't have to go all in. Rarely does that ever work, right? Usually it just becomes overwhelming for companies to try to do it all at once. So just start with some baby steps. Just start with some simple ways to start to seed that in, and then use that as a reflection point, so that, in milestones, you're looking at it as well. So like, okay, how did we do? Did we learn something? Even if it wasn't successful, we learned something from it as a takeaway that added value to us, then making better decisions in the next milestone as well.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Josh. So we are almost in time. We have 5 more minutes. Do you want to share takeaways, or do you want me to ask my last question?
I'm
Yeah,
happy.
any questions to the team?
I'm sorry, what?
Are there any questions to those that are on the call?
I don't think so, but I have a ton of questions.
Sure.
I
And
was
one, yeah,
I
go
was
ahead,
going
Lindsay.
to say, because I don't feel like we really said like where CX should live.
Yes.
There are some companies I've seen it be more successful in HR. There have been some companies I've seen it be more successful in marketing, depending on how the company is structured. Somewhere that the company is all about the experience. The company is all about the service they provide, the product they provide. And when marketing is not a sales generator, it is not an income generator. The reason I say that is because if there's enough of a portion about marketing that is about the company, not about selling a service to the customers of the company, then having CX live there completely makes sense. But if the company is already having high churn, if the company does have problems with their culture and their environment, having CX live in HR makes the most sense. Because for that time, you are in that transition. And oftentimes, a lot of what you're learning is bringing forward a lot of those employees' problems. I know one of the companies I worked with, just trying to do CX research and finding out from the customers, brought up a lot of employee problems. Like there were customers who knew exact sales teams and exact sales departments that were probably going to have employees quitting. And the fact that our customers knew that should have been a flag. So I've also seen companies that HR is where CX even gets its foothold, because they're able to start from the EX lens, the employee experience lens. But I've also seen some companies who have been very fruitful in getting CX propped up alongside UX within the R&D department or the IT department. So one of the interesting things about CX is it can be moved. It doesn't have to reside in one department the entire time. But a lot of companies that build up CX eventually has it as one of their full-on departments. Maybe not as large as a sales or marketing department, but it is still a full-on vertical within the company.
Yeah, just to, of course, there won't be a one size fits all. Because
Exactly.
you have to look
Yes.
at the scenario. I'll add to look at it through maybe a different lens, and say that if it falls under a leader that gets it, it would likely have a better chance of success than, let's say, saying HR or sales or whatever. Because if you have wherever that leader is that gets it, wherever they reside I would think is a good place to start. And like you said, Lindsay, it can move depending on how it evolves and grows and matures, but have it start with somebody who gets it and has the internal clout to be able to move it forward.
But gets it, meaning understanding it, really can do it, not just can sell it. And the reason why I clarify that is I've seen CX fail beautifully at a couple of companies because someone said, oh, I understand it, I know it, and they knew the terms, but that doesn't mean they understood what it was.
Yeah.
Right. It truly understood what it, you
Yeah.
know what I mean here is really truly.
Yeah, I'm just wanting to make sure, like, since it gets on the recording, because someone can
Okay.
make the sales pitch doesn't mean they can walk the walk. Yes.
Mhm.
Okay, we have a question from Ashwani, but we are almost in time, and maybe you can answer this later. Lindsay, Josh, and Rick. But I want to ask you, just for my takeaway, is in 15 seconds, can you tell me, Josh, why CX matters? Like just like Lindsay said, her things. I want to know why CX matters. What what is the elevator pitch of 15 seconds? Like, hey, CX matters because of this.
Yeah, I can try to do even better. I mean, in a nutshell, the reason why CX matters is because we're dealing with humans. We are emotional animals. We make decisions not just by logic. We're not Vulcans. To quote Star Trek here a little bit, but like we also make decisions on behaviors, emotions, influences. All of those are areas that drive our decisions about how we buy products and then how we use them and incorporate them into our lifestyle. And that's why CX is important.
Okay, thank you so much. So, Lindsay, in 15 seconds, please, the shortest answer you can give us why CX matter.
Josh is right, because people matter.
Okay.
We have a cultural backlash happening right now to prove it.
Okay. Rick, do you have a 15 seconds answer to why CX matter?
I do, and I'll sum it up saying your customer is going to have an experience. Any which way you look at it, they will have an experience. Do you want to be intentional about that, or do you want it to be willy-nilly?
The result of your inaction. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. So, guys, do you have time to answer Ashwani's question? Is what will CIOs, CEOs, CXOs appreciate the most in the digital transformation journey?
Is that for like is that customer? Did you mean like a customer journey, or is that within the digital transformation itself?
He says digital transformation journey. I imagine it's
Organizational. So
Yes,
what
ma'am.
I can tell you about the CIOs and the CEOs I've talked to personally, they don't see the connection yet. A lot of them don't understand that there is a connection yet. They only see digital transformation as a way to save them money and a way to get everything aligned for what they believe their intentionality is to be. That's where a lot of people are kind of pitching change management, and they're also I don't know if you've heard of intelligence swarming, but that seems to be another fun term that's come out. Really, it's all about transparency and getting people aligned. So yes, those companies that are doubling down on like ESG and other laws and other legalities that are being passed, they are starting to look at digital transformation for the organization level. But a lot of the CIOs and CEOs that I talk to don't see digital transformation and organizational change as one of the same. They literally see it as, how do I get my digital product line down the line? And it's something similar to even the definition of CX, the fact that it's valuable. You can't exactly sell someone a pill if they don't understand the pill is a pill, and let alone it can help them with anything. So getting that knowledge hurdle covered first is one of the things that not only consulting firms, but education houses and so many places are trying to work on.
Yeah, and just I know we're at time, but like just to round that out, it's a great question because you're recognizing that there's nuances to that.
Yes.
So even in the journey work that I've done over the past 13, 14 years, there should be swim lanes, almost like a service blueprint, if you're familiar with that term, where you're showing different values between the CEO, the CIO, the CFO. All of that, when you do that, nicely in those nuances, you're going to get greater adoption. And to Lindsay's point, there's been a lot of effort around digital transformation. I think what we're starting to see is that companies have like said, we're going to build something and your customers are going to love it. And what they didn't always realize is they didn't bring the customer in enough to where suddenly they took a bad process, digitized it from an analog process. It's still a bad process. And that's just one example of where you need to bring your customers into that relationship to then evolve. So I think there's a big movement now where we're kind of, talking about digital transformation as, needing to evolve. And I think a lot of that discussion is about like, okay, how do we make this even better for the customer, not just for our company as a whole?
Yeah. And even with bringing the customer in, making sure to do that in a thoughtful way, because I know one of the stories I like is about the Ford Edsel. They brought people in and literally gave them everything that they asked for, and that was the worst selling Ford car ever. So when you give people what they asked for, there's that underlying need, and not everyone can speak to their needs. Not everyone can speak to what's going on throughout their day, because it's not how we're built as human beings to think and operate. So having skilled professionals, having skilled minds who are interpreting what is said and understanding and helping to really do that digging into the, okay, you said you needed windshield wipers on your headlights, but why was that? Because you're wanting to make sure you can see in the dark. Awesome. That is the great thing that we need to know. The person who knows how to dig that out of someone else, who knows how to dig that out of a thing, of a process, that is a skill that not enough companies give value to, let alone put in those kind of roles of priority to actually allow them to build these things out.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here, for watching the recording. A few announcements. If you are into CX, please join cxops.org.
Yeah.
They have roundtables every month on the third Thursday of every week.
Third or fourth.
They are really great. It's all about CX. They go really, really hardcore about CX. So if you're into that, please join them. Josh and Lindsay have an amazing content, amazing conversations. Also, please reach out to me, to Lindsay, to Josh, and between you to keep networking, keep learning, because we at World Leadership Co. are developing the next report about design. I'm writing that with Lindsay. We are going a little slow. We are finding earthquakes a little inconvenient. So all things good. I'll be in Austin in the upcoming week, so please reach out and also apply to worldleadership.co to become a member. We have a place where you can speak to each other in a private space. It's not Slack, so things don't die. It will be living forever and forever and forever. We have resources, we have recordings, we have people. So please reach out to me or to Lindsay or Josh or Nick or Ashwani. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Diego, and see you the next time.
Thank you all for joining. This was great.